Are the Phoenix Mercury now contenders?
Welcome back to the PHNX Mercury podcast. I'm your host, Erica Lee Day, and I'm joined by my esteemed QB1, PG1, whatever you really want to call him, Stephen Pridge and Garner. Stephen, it's been a little while since we were in the studio. How you doing today?
Sorry, let's get the vibe. Let's get the vibes going.
There it is. Hey. I've been doing good though. It's been a little minute for sure. We had a lot of news over the last 2 weeks since the last time we recorded. Like a lot of news.
I feel like if there's one thing you can't say about Planet Mercury is that it's been boring. Yeah, it's been I won't even say a tumultuous offseason for this team. It's just been one I think that most people weren't really expecting. So we'll get into that, but obviously we got some people in the chat joining us right off rip. Andy Bryant, Hammered Shite. I've never seen you in the comments before, but welcome to the chat. CWP in that purple lovely bear. How you guys doing today? Thank you guys for joining us. Drop a comment. Be sure to leave a like if you haven't already. Big shouts to Shane Diefenbach for joining us behind the mic and helping us out on this fine Thursday morning today.
Ruining the stream 1 minute in. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
We almost didn't have intro music, but that's okay. Shane almost fired me before the show started. It's
No, I almost quit.
Oh,
Yeah.
You're right.
I don't have the authority to do that.
Oh, good news, everybody. Shane won't fire me, but he might quit. So if we need a producer, I guess Steven and I are going to be figuring it out on the fly. Welcome to the chat, Danny. Thanks you all for joining. Without further ado, though, I guess, we kind of talked. We had a whole emergency podcast. What was that, a week and a half ago now?
Mm-hmm.
I joked about it. It's always on a random Tuesday. Welcome to the random Thursday. We're going to revisit that random Tuesday. And this is a new chapter for the Phoenix Mercury. They have, Diana Taurasi has retired. BG has left the team. It's a whole new big three and vibe around this, franchise here in Phoenix. Obviously, the team has been built around Diana for 20 years now, and it's, moving in a direction that is quite different. And so I'm really excited to talk about that with you today.
Yeah, it's definitely changing of times, the sign of the times, changing of the guard, all of those different ways in which you want to assess some context, bringing in a lot of newness. The Mercury are very much in that kind of phase right now, and I don't think that they could have transitioned from everything that Diana was as a walking identity to everything that Alyssa is in tandem with Kalia Copper. Like, you can never just solely replace everything that was Diana in terms of the identity piece, but one of the best ways you possibly could is if you have both Kalia and Alyssa on your team and they check that box off. So I think their goal is going to look differently, but I think they're going to be in a great space.
Lindsay, I'm sorry it was the worst random Tuesday in February ever. Hopefully there's some games on Tuesdays this year, so I think we're gonna be in for some good Tuesdays too.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't all have to be terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I think is the good news here. So without further ado, I guess let's get into some of this newness. The Phoenix Mercury signed, was it yesterday that they signed all of the
They
four
announced
players?
the official signing. They came at different moments, but they announced them all together.
Yeah. And so they've signed 4 players to training camp contracts. Steven, do you have them pulled up already?
Yeah, we got Lexi Held, Anna Makarat, we got Marjanatu Musa, and then Catherine Westfield.
And I mean, off the top of my head, Feld was played on that DePaul team with Anissa Morrow, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a really, really good team, and she was a huge, huge part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so off the top of my head, that's the one takeaway off that list that I can immediately think of.
Mm-hmm.
With the training camp contracts, you can go into last, season or seasons prior, and it's really difficult to fight your way onto a team.
Yep.
And so, these 4 signings, yes, are going to play a role into how the offseason continues to play out for the Phoenix Mercury. But that said, I'm not expecting any of the four to be huge, playmakers or time stealers on this particular team. I think there's still, even with those four signings, there's room for another Supermax contract on the team still. And so I think, we're still in, I'm still looking to see if the Phoenix Mercury are going to make an additional off-season move beyond just these four signings.
Yeah, I don't think any of these players are going to be pieces that really drive things for them in terms of being like a floor raiser for the team in the rotation. I think maybe one of them, maybe two, make the final rotation after training camp, but I don't know if they stake any claim to the minutes in terms of like an impact type of sense. I think they'll be there to bridge the gap some in case of injury and naturally obviously grow within the program. They're looking to kind of bring some talent in that they can start to develop skill-wise. Yeah. So I can see them fitting that latter niche more than a former, but nonetheless, opportunities are hard to come by in the W still as they're working to expand, and these opportunities are earned. So congratulations to all four of those players on the opportunity that they earned.
Yeah, it's and to be brought to the Mercury is a big deal. I mean, we talk about what a prestigious, franchise it is. They know that as well as we do, It's a big deal to be brought to a franchise like this. And so, even with or without Diana Taurasi, like any development you can get here with these facilities and these, resources available to you, it's a big deal.
It is. And I don't think they'll take that lightly. I think it's going to be one of the more competitive training camps across the entire W. Naturally, for the two players that we spoke to in the opening, kind of helping to bring in the new without Diana Taurasi, throw Satou in that mix, throw Nate in that mix. They're going to be getting after it. And I feel like that's where a lot of what they're ultimately going to become later on in the season will start to lay the kind of foundation for that.
Well, I guess, should we get into the big three welcoming pressers first?
Yeah.
You were there in person. I'm going to say this. It was exactly what I was expecting from Alyssa Thomas in particular. We'll talk about Satou in a second, but with AT in particular, just her winning vibe, exactly what I was expecting out of her. And I love that she blatantly said, I'm still hunting for that title. And, she's still searching, and her search isn't going to stop this season just because she's on a new team. And I think that, her reminding us all of that was, just because she's been in the MVP voting year after year and she's been playing at the level she is, I think a lot of people forget that she doesn't have that title. And so she is coming here hunting for a purpose. And to say that that's good for the Mercury, I think is an understatement when you have someone who already has that mentality. But then, at her age, she knows that, her time might be coming and she needs to get it done. And she's on that hunt right now. The Mercury are going to have that mentality throughout the entire locker room. It doesn't end with just Alyssa Thomas.
I think she is one of the best straight shooters in terms of the approach to the process, and the way she raises the competitive level of everybody that's on the court with her is different. Like, that's a very unique form of leadership that not many other players in the W have, and no one has it as much as she does. No one gets more out of their teammates, especially on the defensive end, than Alyssa does. And within all of that competitiveness and her being a straight shooter, there's a toughness that comes with that. It's just different. It's very, very different. And I think that them having her to add on to everything that Nate was looking to establish last season and really expedite that process on both ends of the floor, it's going to hit for this team. And I think she's going to enjoy another top 5 MVP candidate type of season. But I don't think she'll be alone in being top 6 or top 7 in that. And I think that's where, if this team is at their best, that's the way it's going to have to be. But she'll be the engine because that's her literal nickname. But that's also the natural role that she just walks into whenever she's a part of a team. We even saw it this past summer with Team USA. All of these top-end talents, the best compilation of talent on any roster, arguably in any women's basketball team context, or arguably in any basketball team context outside of the Dream Team. Like, that's a lot of talent they had. And who was a main piece in a lot of that?
AT.
And who helped to close out in the the gold medal game.
Kalia, I won't say it, Copper.
So having both of those two players on your team, I think that's a nice step in the right direction.
Well, and you kind of alluded to it, mentioned it a little bit, but just having that extension of Nate on the court is going to be huge for this team. We got a little bit of a sneak peek with Tosh last year and just having that extension of Nate on the court, but I think that's going to be in a completely new capacity with Alyssa Thomas. The basketball brains on her is just, the IQ is out of this world. And so when you have her along the likes of Nate Tibbetts, who, you know, comes from the NBA background he does, I think you're going to have a really, really dynamic team to be coaching against if you're any other team in the WNBA.
And that's the thing. Nate, like, I think naturally with the way that the roster was set up last season, you might think that Nate is more aligned with the offensive end of the floor than the defensive end.
Right.
I don't think that's the case. I think he is more inclined to the defensive end than the offensive end. Not saying he can't coach offense because he clearly showed that last season. But I'm saying if he had to choose what side of the ball his identity is more lenient towards, I think he would say defense. And naturally with that, you add one of the best defenders of all time, like a defender that you can't put in a box. She can guard point guards, she can guard centers and everywhere in between. She can guard multiple positions in one possession. Like, I think that's where we're going to really start to see things shift because he didn't have a piece like that on the roster last season. And that's no offense to anyone that was on the Mercury roster last year, but Alyssa's an all-time great defender in a way in which almost no one else in the history of the league has defended.
Right.
And she can do that in a sustained manner, and it allows for you to dictate to your opponents in a way that you couldn't last season. And I think that's something that if you're looking at what's the difference between this year's team and last season's team, it's that alone. They can dictate with their defense, and they'll also be able to close out those possessions because she's one of the best rebounders in this era of women's basketball too. And
I think this conversation lends itself to have to bring up Satou Sabally at this point because when you're talking about the defensive end of the court, I mean, the allowance that the Mercury is going to have on the defensive end of the court is almost unlimited between the big three. And then you add in any pieces around it. Like you said, the Alyssa Thomas can defend 1 through 5. Kalia Copper can defend 1 through 5. Satou Sabally can also defend 1 through 5. You've got 3 players that can pretty much go anywhere on the court at any time. And, you know, I think something we really hammered hard last year was putting the clothes on the defensive end of the court, but then also pushing the pace on the offensive end of the court. And I think that is exactly what we're going to be seeing this year, is that the pace is going to be pushed to a site we probably didn't really get to see last season.
Yeah, that's the other thing. You got 2 players that have certainly spent time on all defensive teams, and you got another one that's been spent the latter end of last season asking why no one pays attention to how impactful she is on the defensive end. And I'll go ahead and say Kalia Copper doesn't get the 2021 Finals MVP without being able to play defense against Skylar Diggins-Smith and against Diana Taurasi without being able to do so in an impactful manner. Like, the buckets are the buckets, yes, and they were very loud. But she's also going in defending. She's starting a possession on Sophie, ends up getting switched on to Skylar or Diana, and she's handling her business. And I think that, but her also not having an offensive load to carry that she had to last season is going to be very, very different. Alyssa can shoulder a lot of that. Satou can shoulder a lot of that, to the extent where they work with each other on offense in such a complementary way that defensively they'll be allowed to exert more energy over the course of 40 minutes, especially come playoff time, in a way in which they weren't able to in seasons past on their respective teams. So I think that's going to be something that really helps all of them.
Did y'all just hear Steven say that Alyssa can shoulder a burden? Because
yeah, that's a bar. It's a bar in many different ways. It's like a quadruple entendre, if I'm being honest. But
I almost interrupted you, but I'm like, you know, I'll let him cook. But
for sure.
the Alyssa shoulder jokes are just starting. This is episode 1 of the Alyssa shouldering jokes. So any hoodly doodly, yes, exactly everything that you just said. I think that the pace is going to be a really important piece on this team. I think when you play to the defensive end the way that we are anticipating that this team is going to be doing, it's really important that you get off things in transition. And so the pace is going to be, I think, number 1 most important thing I'm going to be looking for fresh out of the gates with this Mercury team.
Yeah, and between both of their pressers, a lot of the hot words were versatility, competing, and defense. And naturally, like we said, you have the three pieces that they have at the top of the roster. Everybody else is gonna pick up the baton off of the precedent that they set. They're naturally already doing that in their individual roles in years past. So you put them together, can only imagine the heights at which they can reach defensively and activity and versatility. And the big thing with that, with all three of those players also being above average to borderline elite, if not in the case of Alyssa, extremely elite at rebounding the basketball for their respective positions, that lends itself into that pace that you're talking about, because I think that's going to be where they're at their best offensively. When they're able to play in the open floor because they're getting those proverbial kills when you get 3 stops in a row. All three of these players can get a steal. All three of these players can fill a lane in transition. All three of these players can grab a rebound and go. That eliminates the get it to a guard buffer that stagnates your offense about 2 seconds, allows for the defense to then get back in transition. And now the advantage that is transition isn't as much of one because you're kind of wasting time. They don't have to waste any time. And the grab and go sequences that they're going to be able to compile with these three players is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to that. But I think there's a unheralded piece within all of that we'll get to a little bit later, and I can't wait to speak on that soon.
Well, I'm kind of excited to hear what.
I have questions about it, but I think the piece is gonna be fun to watch with these type of three players that they're at the top of the rotation.
Steven's kind of acting like he's like holding a secret from me or something right now.
I mean, it's not a literal secret, but
and I don't really
the information
like that.
is very public. But I'm saying because of the top pieces being so loud, there's things at the middle that can kind of be lost in the weeds. We'll get to it though. We'll get to it naturally.
Okay. He's stressing me out right now. I feel like I'm missing something because he's telling. Yeah, I think okay.
When I get to it, the light bulb moment going off is gonna be fun to watch. I'll say that.
Steven knows I haven't had any food yet today, and he wants to make me use my brain. So
exactly, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Well, I guess my big question about Nate in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And you hinted at it earlier, and that a lot of people assumed his coaching likes were on the offensive side of the ball, and that's why we saw the likes of Kalia getting the threes she was getting. Same thing with BG, and we could go down the laundry list of the unique sets we saw out of the Mercury last year. But the threes in particular, are you thinking that that's going to continue at the rate in which it did last season, or do you think that the volume is going to go up because of all the other things that you just or volume is going to go down because of all the other things that you just dropped?
I think there's going to be a drop off in terms of the number of threes he's anticipating or expecting for them to generate. And I think that's going to be offset some by how well Alyssa operates from the free throw line and down. And for her to be optimized on offense, she's either going to be getting the ball in those spots or she's going to naturally be able to drive her way to those spots. And to get the impact that you want out of Alyssa, you have to allow for her to operate in her office, and that's bullying her way to the paint whenever she wants to. But naturally, in tandem with her scoring is also going to be defenses collapsing on her, and she's one of the best playmakers in the league in addition to being arguably the best driver of the basketball in the league. So with the spacing that they have and with her ability to get a paint touch whenever she wants to, that's going to lend itself to threes being generated. And that's where the team dynamic starts to come in play because you have Sami Whitcomb, one of the best three-point shooters in W history. You have Satou, who was shooting north of 40% on a above-average clip last season. That has to hold up. Kalia saw hers fall off on the latter stretch of the season, but she's a player that's shown to be able to hit north of 40% on 2.5 to 3 attempts a game. She'll need to get up the volume while maintaining that efficiency as well. But they'll be able to generate the looks off of either one of their big three because they all can get paint touches.
Well, and you already brought her up, so let's talk about it. Sami Whitcomb and Kalani Brown. Two of the bigger puzzle pieces that kind of do exactly that, get lost in the shuffle a little bit in all these acquirements that the Mercury had in the offseason. But Kalani, to me, is extremely loud and is an extreme need of the Mercury. If you go back to any episode last season after a game that the Mercury lost, you'll probably hear me whining about rebounding. And Kalani does that at a very high rate, successfully, and on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And so, she's going to be generating more possessions for the team, as well as, like you said, with Sami. Sami is one of the best three-point shooters in the league, and she's playing her rear end off right now in Australia. So
MVP caliber basketball being played.
Like, for real, playing her rear end off over there.
Yeah, we can start with Kalani, the literal big presence, but also figuratively and personality. I think is going to be something that really helps to bring the team together. Not that they'll need that per se, but it's great to have that in droves within your locker room. I think we can see it won't be the exact same as last season, but we'll see that camaraderie where they're having fun in ways in which we did see the last season's roster clearly enjoy spending time together, to the point where people like Natasha Cloud was saying she genuinely loves coming to work because you never know what to expect, and meaning that in the most endearing way.
Which actually, while we're on the topic, I've been seeing a lot of people over the last like 3 or 4 days talk about what happened in the Mercury locker room last season, and I'm going to actually put that conversation to a halt right here today, because I think we are all forgetting the fact that this team went through the Burger King drive-thru on foot in the postseason last year. I think we're forgetting that this team had a gazillion hours of fun in training camp and then continued to do so into the season. I think that there's a lot of speculation regarding, player movement and coming from things that happen within the locker room. And I think a lot of people forget that at the end of the day, this is a business and the people in the locker room are not making those decisions. And so I think that the locker room problems that you guys are alluding to simply just did not exist.
Yeah, I would not put myself in that discourse personally. Just
sorry,
because,
I just had to enter. I was just like, I've been seeing this for like 4 days, and I spent a lot of time in around the team last year, and I've been also around a lot of basketball teams that did not like each other, and it's very obvious when that happens. And this was not one of those cases. And you can't look at the retirement, you can't look at BG leaving, you can't look at Tosh getting traded. None of those things happen because of something going wrong in the locker room, and I just wanted to make that very, very clear on the show.
Yeah, it's just a sign of the movement era of women's basketball in the WNBA in particular.
I mean, you had texted me about Tosh potentially getting traded, and I laughed. I'm like, no way that's ever going to happen. You guys are hilarious people. Like, just because of how good things were in the locker room last year. And I had to even call myself out for a second. And again, this is a business, and there are people that are not in those locker rooms that are making those decisions. So
yeah, that's the thing. You have to understand just how much was at stake this season, coming into this season at least. And the way that the CBA was set up with basically 95% of the W being on a contract that ended after this upcoming season. So naturally that lends itself to a bunch of movement. Teams are trying to stack the deck as much as they can and then revisit whatever context their roster's in after this season. But teams are pushing all of their chips to the table for this season because of the CBA situation. So it didn't have anything to do with the players that were on the roster last season. It's just a sign of the times, and this won't be the last time.
It's
really,
yeah.
It's gonna be a lot of movement.
Offseason was crazy. Just you wait. Like, I just cannot express to you. Next year is going to be total and utter complete chaos.
And 2027 is going to be crazy, probably even crazier than this past summer was.
In my head, every team is like signing these players, and then they're going to spend the entire season this year selling themselves to these free agents that signed with them, or the trades that they came here, so that when the CBA does come out next season, they can potentially re-sign them. So I think you're gonna see a lot of resources for these teams go up in this season, because like I said, you're gonna see just these teams trying to sell themselves. But at the end of the day, like, the chaos is just beginning.
And that's why I just want to make sure that it doesn't have to be toxic and negative.
Thank you.
In terms of the discourse, like, just let things be what they are. It's very much business.
I don't know if y'all saw, but Luka Doncic also got traded from the Dallas Mavericks. No one thought that was going to happen. Okay. And I don't see those comments being as nasty as the ones about the Phoenix Mercury. So thank you very much for coming to my TED Talk. Anyways, back to what you were saying, Steven.
Yeah. With Kalani specifically, the need for rebounding, the need for size outside of Brittany Griner last season was something that was clear. And that leads me to, I guess, a question. I wanted to ask it later, but since we're talking about Kalani, for you, is Kalani starting, or is she like the super sub that comes in and adds size to the rotation after?
For me, she is that sixth player. And I think part of it is just because of what we've already talked about with this team being so positionless. And so I think that she has a very clear role on the team. And I think her being able to come in and do that when the starters are either fragmented because someone is benched or whatever, I think that that is the key to this team's success, is being able to plug and push as needed. And I think Kalani would be the perfect piece to plug in place of any of the three players we've already talked about at length.
I still kind of go back and forth with it, because I'm curious who the fifth in terms of the starting lineup is going to be. Are they going to go for a guard or a wing, or is it going to be naturally Kalani?
In your head is is Sami Whitcomb an automatic starter? Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was thinking. And I'm curious who they're gonna bring in at the backup first, but because honestly, Celeste is playing so well overseas, but there are other options on the team as well. So I mean, your guess is as good as mine for a backup point guard, and it's such a tough position to fill because, again, of the positionless nature of this particular roster.
And I think that's the thing that people need to keep in mind with the Mercury. Because I know I've seen a lot of conversation about point guards, which we'll naturally talk about a little bit later. But you have Alyssa Thomas, you have Satou Sabally, and Kalia Copper. You want the ball in your best player's hands as much as you possibly can. And you want pieces that might be able to do a little bit of that in terms of initiating the offense. But more than anything, you want them to be able to complement what they're looking to do in the half court in particular. So it's more so about the fitting in part than it is we need someone to set the table for them, because they can set the table for each other and the rest of the roster whenever they want to. But to that point, I feel like at this present moment, Kalani is coming off the bench as well. I think that the versatility that you get with Alyssa Thomas at the 5, one of the most effective lineups in the W the last 5 years now, it seems like. It's a point that you can dictate to your opponents with, and it allows for Nate to get into his bag, which I speak to him being slightly more inclined defensively than he is on the offensive end. Now he can play with the matchups in the ways that he wanted to last season. He can play the more switching in ways that he's wanted to. He can press a lot of those buttons on versatility and schemes this season more so than he could last season because of the presence of Alyssa as well as Satou. So with that, I think it's Alyssa at the 5, Satou at the 4, Kalia at the 3 or the 2, however you want to look at that. Sami Whitcomb's out there, and then the guard, I'll just say Sevi Uzun right now, but that could change. We just kind of have to wait and see about it, but I think that's what they rock with for the most part. But I think in certain matchups, we will see Kalani starting games. Naturally, you go up against Atlanta. They're going to probably be starting 2 bigs. Naturally, you go up against Tierra McCowan in Dallas. That's another opportunity to do that. Maybe when you go up against Connecticut, they got Emma Mieseman over there now. That might be a piece that you want to use her to kind of dictate to them with. There's opportunities for them to start her, but I don't think they'll be starting her full time on terms of an every single game basis.
But both of our points said that doesn't mean Kalani will not play a ton of minutes for this team.
She's going to play a very relevant role.
I think she's destined at about 25 minutes on this team.
Yeah,
so.
She probably played, at this moment, the most minutes off the bench for sure. Yep.
Well, all that and a little bit of a preview, projections for where we think the team are going to land after this short ad break. There it is. The NASCAR returns to Phoenix Raceway March 7th through 9th. Join us at the Stars of NASCAR Battle it out for the Shriners Children's 500 at the Phoenix Raceway. Nothing like witnessing the Stars of NASCAR battle 200 miles per hour on this 1-mile oval raceway in the foothills of Estrella Mountains. 40 drivers will compete amongst the likes of Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin, Ross Chastain, and Bubba Wallace, and even Tucson's own Alex Bowman. At the 2024 NASCAR's Cup Series champion, Joey Logano. It is the best-in-class fan experience the whole family won't forget. I've been the last 3 years, and it actually is a whole lot of fun. I was just harassing Max to see if he could get me in for free. Max, if you're listening, please, please, please. I'm asking nicely. But seriously, it is a lot of fun. You can bring the whole family, go on the track, and it's a hoot and a holler. So get on down there to the Phoenix Raceway. Get your tickets now at phoenixraceway.com. Whether you're a first-time homebuyer or a seasoned pro, buying a home can be tricky. That's why we recommend our friends over at Carol Royce team. Our real estate market is competitive, but like a great coach, the Carol Royce team will help you build a great game plan to get you into the perfect home for you. Some of you guys just might know, I just moved out of my parents' house. Carol Royce team, shout out to them for helping me out. Shade. Worried about financing? Carol works with the best lenders, ensuring you get the best rates and loan options. If you're ready to find your dream home, take the next steps. Call Carol Royce or visit Carol online at carolroyceteam.com. That's carolroyceteam.com. Terms and conditions do apply. Well, Steven,
let's talk a little Sami before we get to our next.
You're right,
because that is the person that I was speaking to a little bit earlier.
Really? I thought it was Kalani.
Yes, it's Kalani, but it's more so Sami is because you asked about the three-point shooting.
Oh, okay.
Sami is one of the all-time greats, and she gets to it in multiple contexts, off of movement. She can get into pull-ups off of pick and roll.
She sure can.
At times, she can run a secondary pick and roll for you. Sami is just great. A very great complementary type of connecting piece. And I think that when you have top-end talents that they have on this roster and the attention that's needed to take the ball or take spots away from them on the floor, that help's got to come off of somebody. And if it's little old Sami spaced on the second side of an action and you want to continue to shrink the floor on an Alyssa Thomas paint touch drive like we spoke to, or Satou, or Kalia Copper, if you're helping off of Sami, there's going to be consequences. And she is a sniper, laser, whatever type of gun reference you want to make, she's got it. And she knocks the three down with such a high volume of frequency, high volume of efficiency. It just hits different, especially when she's playing off of the attention that these players can garner. And I think that because of that, and with her being spaced the ways in which she will be for this team, I think that's something that's going to help them really take other steps past just those three players putting the ball in the basket or how those three players are being featured, because a lot of it's going to also be, well, how are the teams going to account for a Sami being spaced around him in many different ways, because there will be consequences to pay if you leave her open. And the other big thing I also want to look at with Sami, I talk about her being a connecting piece. We talked about this last season with specifically Rebecca Allen and Sophie Cunningham, and that's the guards being able to screen, and also Diana naturally, guards being able to screen, and how that hits different versus a big coming up to set a screen. Sami's one of the best small screeners in the W. She's been there for a handful of seasons. The confusion that causes and how she'll be able to set screens for Alyssa Thomas, who is a very good ball handler and very good pick and roll initiator, is going to hit different when you have the pieces around their offense that they do. So I think Sami's going to help to really shift things in a way in which might be too much, not pressure, but maybe depending on her a little bit more than they desire to if they were looking at constructing their roster. But I think she'll be more than good enough to hold up a lot of that production that they're going to be needing. And they can also insulate her well defensively.
Well, I think, the four players you just spoke about at length there, like the spacing that those four allows are going to be pretty great. And so, it's going to be a pick your poison battle every night for every team in this league to decide who they're going to, like you said, collapse on or go out and guard Sami and pick your
consequences.
Right. And so, I think that offense is going to suit a Nate Tibbetts pretty well, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think they'll play perfectly to the spacing templates that he cycled through last season. Maybe not in the way in which they're getting up as many threes as last season's team did, but in a sustained manner, I think the offense will be more effective.
Yeah, everything you're saying to me sounds like they're going to be a lot more effective inside. Than they were last season.
For sure.
And again, kind of like I spoke to, if they're not, the possessions, amount should go up because they won't struggle to rebound the ball as much.
Yep, they won't struggle to rebound, and they'll be able to probably get more steals, play with more activity than they did last season, and it's going to look like a track meet at times with
I
this
feel like
team.
we talked a lot about chaos last year.
We did.
And I feel like that's going to grow even more so this season.
There's an uptick to that coming this season.
And
the
turnovers will all come from no look passes and crazy crap like that.
And the turnovers are coming a ton of different ways. Alyssa is just going to be hedging all over the place. Satou's going to be switching all over the place. If Kalani's on the court, Alyssa will be just roaming around like we see with Asia at times, like we see with Brianna Stewart at times. I think Alyssa does that better than both of those two players defensively, and that's no slight to either one of those two, but it just speaks to how great and how much of an athlete Alyssa is in space and her defensive instincts. I think her defensive instincts are going to just be all over this team in terms of its identity, and that'll naturally play itself into the offensive end.
Well, do you think we should grade the offseason? I think we should. I think it's important before we do this that I note that I still think an offseason move is coming from the Mercury. I don't think any team in the league is really done. It's only March 6th. We got like a month and a half until training camp kicks off. Like there's a lot of time left.
Yeah, it's about 50-ish days left or so.
Man, it really snuck up on you, huh? I was just talking the other day about how, I was going to put out this countdown tweet and then I was grumpy because I wasn't really sure what we were calling the arena. And so I've just been mad about that. I'm like, I'm counting down to go where?
Yeah.
Literally where. Anyways, so this offseason, though, pretty exciting. So I'll let you take the reins on this and give us your grade for the Mercury.
Yeah, for me, they get an A+. I never will bat an eye for a franchise going for it. I don't think enough franchises go for it. I think a lot of times we see the big brain dynamic where there's too much thinking involved, where if you have an opportunity to go for it all, absolutely you should be doing it. And it's for most contexts, if you're not trying to like develop super young talent and offsetting that by going for it all, if you can do so at the same time, or you can just all out push all of your chips to the table, you should be doing it. And I think they did that as well as they possibly could, especially pivoting from what was likely stemming from conversations ending last season that Diana might not be coming back. Obviously, information we weren't privy to that extent. All we could do was speculate. But if you know Diana's on the fence and leaning towards potentially not coming back, and you're not sure about what that decision is going to entail for Brittany Griner and her decision to come in free agency, you have to have a fail-proof philosophy in a sense, where if you're looking 4 months in advance and you're assessing what you did in the offseason, if you think you checked off all your boxes as well as you possibly could, to where you feel good rolling the dice as a team that desires to contend this season, and you look at the roster that they have now, I feel like they've done that.
Did you give a grade?
Oh, no, I did not. There's still questions with the roster, but if we're assessing it just for the offseason, A+.
Oh, he did?
Yeah. I did, yeah. There you go.
Okay, my apologies, everybody. I'm going to say a B+, only because I still feel like there's a big move coming. I don't think it's going to be a little like, oh, we're talking about these 4 players and they probably won't make anything. Like, no, I think it's going to be a really big move that's going to happen. I think as we've seen with Suns and even the Mercury this year, like they like to go get those big names. And I think that they've got that room on their salary cap for a reason. And they're waiting for somebody to make some sort of decision. I think, we've talked all year about the defense on this team, and I think the moves that they made lends itself to improve that defense. And so I'm really excited to see that. So I'm not giving anything bad, but a B+ gives room for improvement. So I think the future in the comments says the depth piece, not that it worries me, because I like our bench, and I like the rookies, for lack of a better term, that we have on the team. The newer pieces, the young folks, if you will. And yeah, McFubin, I would love to end up with a big 4 is really what this all comes down to. And I think that that's extremely, extremely possible with just the current landscape of where the Mercury's at right now.
Yeah. I feel like they might have another move in their back pocket. I'm not sure exactly what it'll be. But I feel like if they can find a guard, and I'm not saying that they need a point guard in particular, but if they can find someone else that can help to either facilitate offense or play off of the advantages that their top 3 can create and give defenses something else to have to pay for if they decide to send help from somewhere, I think that's something that can really kind of turn things in a way that's really going to cement them as a team that's opportunity-wise able to take that next step towards getting to that level that Minnesota and naturally the New York Liberty are at, because everybody, including the Las Vegas Aces, are playing catch up to those 2 teams in particular, because they were the class of the league from start to finish. It started with Minnesota. I don't know why it was a surprise to so many people, but it was a surprise to most people that they were able to have the start to the season they did, sustain, and then add on top of that in the playoffs. And then New York was where they were. So I think everybody's playing catch up to those 2, but I think the Mercury have as good of a chance as any team not named Indiana or Las Vegas to kind of make that jump.
The 4 teams you just mentioned, Mercury, Indiana, well, I guess 5, Vegas, and then New York and Minnesota. In your head, is that like cemented as the top 5? Do you think there's another team that maybe has room to move back into the top, we'll say top 6?
I think the top 2 are the only 2 teams cemented.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of parity
around
from the rest of the league because I feel like there's probably 8 teams that I could see a case where if this goes well for them and they sustain, they might be able to be in the playoffs in a way, and they might be able to be as high in the rankings in a way that I maybe didn't see. So I think that parity is going to make it imperative for the start to the season to be good. And I think that for the Mercury, a lot of where they're going to be starting and we're going to see them be impactful most is going to start defensively. I think they'll have some hurdles to get through on the offensive end in the half court, but if they're playing off of stops and they're getting stops in the multiple different ways in which I feel like they should be able to, and they get their foot in on that end of the court, you bridge that gap playing the transition a lot, but then you also go into your offense with flow. And I think that's the identity that they look to want to establish coming into this season.
I think, the benefit to me in my head is that the continuity is there with Nate and this whole coaching staff, really. Like, there hasn't, a lot of teams had a lot of turnover with their coaching staff. And so we are really, really lucky here in the Valley that I'll just say her name because I think everybody's made their hires. Chrissy Tolliver has been marked safe. At least
for one more.
I get nervous though, like, because college season's about to end. So I'm like, I don't want anyone to like hear. No one heard that. I actually didn't say that. So marked safe for another
a hot commodity.
Yeah.
And there's no douse in that fire.
I just need one really quickly. Yeah. You know, the face scans on 2K are sometimes really bad. Nate Tibbetts is horrible. It's just like a random regular old white dude. Okay. Christy Tolliver's face scan is so freaking good. Like,
well, I wonder if they already had hers in there because she was on the Mavericks bench.
Dude. But you would think they would have already had Nate's on there too, right?
Fair.
And so I was like, I'm confused. When I saw KT on that bench of my 2K team, I said, hold the phone. That is legitimately Christy Tolliver right there.
You guys ever scan your own face into the game? When they did that?
I haven't been on the sticks too much the last couple of years, so I haven't got around to that part.
I've been blowing off some basketball steam on there.
2K13 or whatever the first time it was. 15 maybe?
Yeah, 15 I think.
When they first did the face scans, and I did that, and they used to just do it with a phone. Oh my God. It created monsters. It was horrifying. Like, half of my face was one color because of like shadows. It was awful. Like, my nose was like Pinocchio. It was crazy. Like, you got some crazy results from those.
Well, they slayed with Chrissy Tolliver. It's better than like 60% of the actual players in the league. Like, I'm looking at Skylar Diggins-Smith. Like, are you serious right now? Y'all got Chrissy Tolliver looking so fresh over here.
They had to redo Angels and a couple of other players. Yeah, that was, they got, if you're going to do it, you got to be better at it.
Also, the fact that they just made Kelsey Plum like lightning fast, that you would think she's God the way they put her into the game. Okay, I just have to say that. All right, I'm done, but they need to put me in charge of the skill sets of those players because someone is making critical errors in those programming.
Yeah, there's opportunity, and there's a lot of people that know what they're talking about in this space to where you don't have to make guesses.
Right.
You can just rely on someone that's a source for you to do that. It has to be better.
I do got to list Diana Taurasi's shooting pattern down with a quickness though. Don't y'all worry. I put the stoppage on those boys with her.
I believe it.
Anyways, back to whatever you were saying, Steven, before I rudely interrupted you to talk about Christy Tolliver.
Projections. I think that's I guess what are we watching for first? What are we watching for with this team? Anything in your mind that you want to see that you're anticipating or that you maybe have like a question about that you want to see them answer?
I will say this. I'm looking for 2 all defensive team players early. And I want the benchmark to be set, the precedent to be set, that this is what the defense is expecting from the entire team all season. And I think that's really what it comes down to with Alyssa and why she's so important to this team. And then also, like you said, the offense is going to take some time. You see this with every WNBA team that has a lot of movement in the offseason, that the offense just takes a little time to come around because of how short their training camp is and so on and so forth. But I am looking for that efficiency to go up and for them to be willing to do what needs to be done to rebound the basketball. And I talked about it a lot last year. The pursuit of the basketball was not there with that team last year. And the pursuit of the basketball has to be there with this team. 50-50 balls, fighting for fighting for your right to win the game. And so, you know, I think I'm looking for that grit early from this team.
I like that one. I think that's something that will certainly be there for this team. I don't think last season's team was bad defensively or nearly as bad as the statistical metrics suggest. I think that they just couldn't get past their first stop, meaning grabbing rebounds, which is what you're speaking to. We talked a lot about it with Sophie Cunningham and Natasha Cloud last season. How hard it is to play defense already as it is, but if you tack on an extra 14 seconds in addition to that, that's like that really eats away at your energy. If you have to, especially if you're a team like they were last season where they either relying on a lot of switching or they're making a lot of defensive rotations. If you have to do that for more than just that 24 seconds, that starts to really eat away at your energy. Also concedes momentum to your opponents and forces you to go up against a set defense time after time after time. And that gets arduous if you're talking about trying to play a certain style of basketball and you have to consistently take the ball at the net. So I don't think that'll be an issue with this team this season because of their personnel. Talked about Alyssa Thomas. Naturally, also Kalani Brown in the rebounding. Just simply having a box out the tree that Kalani is going to be work. And if you put that in tandem with Satou and potentially Alyssa Thomas, if not all three of those players being on the court at the same time, those rebounds should be theirs. And naturally getting to the other end will come easy as well.
Do you picture Alyssa playing a lot of like point forward, backup point, like on this team and being the primary? Like, do you envision Alyssa being the primary ball handler of this team?
I do.
Because that's how I see it from the outside. I think that it makes the most sense. And that's where she's suited the best. Her playmaking is arguably the best asset that she has. And we've already talked at length about all the awesome other assets she has. But that playmaking ability of hers is next to none, really. And so, you know, I think that that's going to lend itself for this team to be really, really efficient on the offensive end of the court.
I think that naturally kind of segues into one of my questions, and that's what is the offense going to look like in the half court in particular? Because you have multiple initiators. Sami can initiate offense at times if you need to as well. How much of it is going to be Alyssa Thomas initiating, and what's going on around her within all of that? Is the floor just going to be spaced at times and she's going to have options to pick in terms of where she wants to drive and that is the trigger for the offense? Or is she starting off the ball and Kalia or someone else is initiating and you got Satou or Kalia that's working in movement on the other side of the court while Alyssa's getting a screen from someone like Sami in an inverted pick and roll scenario? Like, I feel like there's just so many different ways. Like, what's going to be their main channel for getting into offense? What are going to be their triggers that they flow through most often to get a defense rotating or get them to make a decision? And then after that, it's just how well do they keep the advantages that they were able to create? Because last season, they were very good when they were creating the advantages of keeping it into good shot quality. Wide open catch and shoot threes were what they value most last season if it wasn't a Brittany Griner post touch. And I think there's a shift that takes place there with them on offense this season. So how sustained are they going to be in their approach? How much is Kalia going to be involved in initiating? What's her playmaking looking like? Is she going to be getting those touches off of movement on the second side that made her the 2021 Finals MVP and one of the best players in the league? How much is she balancing that with Satou? Because Satou operates in similar manners as far as that goes. So it's just questions as far as that goes. I don't think there's a wrong answer. And I think the ultimate answer is probably that they just cycle through a lot of that. But I'm just curious how much of that is going to be Alyssa initiating versus
in my head, at the beginning of the season, almost everything goes through Alyssa because of the reasons we just kind of spoke about how hard it is to find that offensive rhythm when you're a team with as many new pieces as this one, or even just not even the new pieces, but everyone else on the team virtually is pretty young too. So you got to not keep the playbook small, but keep it simple, stupid, right? You know? So I think it would be almost Nate can be a little greedy at the beginning of the season with Alyssa and keep the ball in her hands a lot, and I don't think that will bode unsuccessful for this team.
I think if I could word it right, my idea for this offense is complexity and the simplicity, and that's a simple handoff between, or a simple pick and roll or handoff between Alyssa and Satou. What our team is going to do? Are they going to switch that?
Yeah.
And if you switch that, there's going to be a price to pay in some capacity because Alyssa's going to have someone that either doesn't have the foot speed or the size to deal with her, if not both, to take that shoulder or that bump that comes. And then the same thing comes when you're looking at Sami screening mixed in there, Khalil on the second side playing off a closeout, so a rotating defense. There's just so much complexity from them just keeping it simple. I don't think they'll have to run as exotic of sets as other teams do to create advantages because they have players that just simply create it whenever the ball is in their hands.
Agreed. Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to get at is I think at the beginning, like it will have to go through Alyssa, but by the end of the season, anyone on the floor basically will be able to handle the ball at any time. And then on top of that, to feed back on our point about Kalani earlier with her playing, you know, filling in that 5 position off the bench, I think, you know, Alyssa's ability to handle the ball is going to be clutch for moments like that too, where it's like you have to have Kalani at the 5 because of size or whatever the situation may be. And so Alyssa is just going to be a plug and pull all year. And I think Nate is going to have so much fun with Alyssa in particular.
Yeah, I think because of the spacing and because of the ways in which Alyssa will not be leaned on for as the hub of the offense as much as she has in years past, I think she gets back to those MVP level stats.
Agreed.
At 15, probably 11 or 10 rebounds and a bunch of assists mixed into all of that. She might be close to averaging a triple-double with this team next season, with her usage not necessarily taking a hit, but the uniqueness of it is going to be different compared to seasons past.
Well, and if Kalia has a season similar at all in the caliber in which she had last season, which I think of all the things we talked about, this season will lend itself for Kalia to have a better season than she had last season. And I think that lends itself to the conversation of, are we having the conversation at the end of the year of the Mercury having 2 MVP candidates on their team? And so, you know, we started the show by saying, are they contenders? How can you not be contenders when you have 2, you know, MVP caliber players on your team? And then on top of it, you've got Satou Sabally and Sami and the rest of the pieces all around it.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that one of the best ways in which they can get to that point where the offense is being optimized, in addition to everything we talked about defensively, Kyle's 3-point shooting has to get back to where it was the season prior, where she was north of 40%.
Yeah.
Last season, she averaged 21. That was 3rd in the league.
Well, and honestly, I bet that the last 16 games of the season after the All-Star break are the worst of that. Like, I would gander that the beginning was upwards of almost 40%. Yeah. So. Yeah,
that's the thing, because they have to, for their offense to get to where it wants to be, they have to have defenses not have a choice in defending them, but only a certain few types of ways.
Yeah.
And last season in the playoffs, and when she saw the low that she did with her 3-point shooting, teams were giving her unders and pick and roll, and when she was working off the screens off ball. And when she can't turn a corner like that, she can definitely still score the ball. But what it does, which is working to the defense's advantage, is it steals away their flow.
Yeah.
It steals away the movement. And if the teams can just load up the gaps and keep her from turning corners like that, that makes it tough. The same thing with Satou. Satou was at 43, 44% last season from deep. Both of those 2 players have to stay north of 40. I would say no lower than 38% on a higher volume, because they need teams to chase those 2 over their screens.
Yeah.
If they're chasing them over, that's where the paint touches come from. And that's where all of the offense with those 2 in the paint below the free throw line or kicking it out to shooters to keep an advantage just starts to weigh on an opponent. So they can't get to a point where teams are comfortable just playing with the unders against them. And I think that if they stay where they're supposed to be, which I don't feel like there's a reason why they can't, especially with the way that their offense will be set up, they'll be all right.
Ogre, I have to laugh at your comment. Cut to next season when the consensus is the Merc failed because they needed a point guard. Sorry, Suns trauma.
Yeah, that's very much Suns trauma, and I don't think they'll have the same issues that the Suns do because of how those 3 players play defense. I think that you're looking at building teams, and you're looking at, for the way that the Suns have gone about it, just putting the best talent on paper. What about how those pieces play to the defensive end of the floor? Only one of those 3 players that they have on their roster with their big 3 identifies with that end of the court, but you cannot say that at all, even on the worst day of Satou, Alyssa, or Kalia. And that's not even as a slight or disrespect.
Are there any NBA teams that have 3 players that, like, focus on the defensive end of the court?
There's a couple of teams, and all of those teams are contending right now.
Oh, good for them.
So, I mean, a novel concept, having players that care about the defensive end might give you a chance at winning the championship or at least competing for it.
Okay, no more Suns talk, y'all guys.
We'll be here at 3 o'clock in a couple hours. But to that point, though, that's a reason why I feel like there's just a certain floor that this Mercury team has. Because even with the snags they might see defensively, if teams do decide to try to go under on Satou and Kalia in 2-player or 3-player action scenarios, they can still get it done defensively to where schemes on defense from an opposing defense won't even matter because they're always back in transition.
Well, before we go, I think I don't want to go like game by game or anything like that, but there's 44 games. Yep. And I just would like both of us to, before, we get too close to training camp and we've seen too much with our own 2 eyes, I just want us to gander and give our prediction for an end of season record. And I think that, rounds out our predictions for this 2025 Phoenix Mercury team.
Yeah, I see the Mercury getting to 25 wins in the regular season, or if you bump it up 2 games, 27 wins.
Isn't there a thing in the NBA where it's like if you get to 40 wins and 20 losses, before 20 losses, you're like guaranteed to be a contender or something like that? Do you think there's a formula like that for the WNBA?
Remains to be seen because this is the first time they've played this many games in the season. So
we'll have to see.
I think there'll be a lot of data being collected. And I think that the Mercury will be very much probably 4th, 5th.
That's what I'm seeing, like third or 4th in the West, and I hate that.
Yeah. If I'm looking at the league as a whole, I'm thinking they'll be 4 or 5 in that range with an opportunity to punch up if their offense kind of sustains a little sooner than I expect for it to.
Yeah, and I hate saying this, but after last season, I just hope for a over 500 record. And like it's so easy to get into the playoffs in the WNBA with an under 500 record. So if they finish the season with over 500, I'll be stoked. I'll be like, oh, this is a big win. But yeah, 4th or 5th in the league does I think slate this team rather nicely. And that's without that 12th piece that we've yet to see yet.
Yeah. And I think that if we're looking at the way that the league is set up right now, the top 2 teams are the top 2 still coming into this season, in my opinion, and everybody else is vying for those other spots. If the Mercury can get out the gate to a good start, I think that's going to be important for them because of the parity that's naturally going to ensue as the season goes on. They have to stake their claim early, in my opinion, because of the newness, not necessarily in coaching, like you said, which is an advantage for them, but the newness in roster.
Everything else,
the identity, quite literally not having the player who's most synonymous with your franchise's history is not there anymore for the first time.
Her. Yeah,
practicing
it's
on her court without
her.
No Brittany Griner.
Yeah.
Like things are very different. So I think that they have to find a way to get out to a high start, and that starts with the defensive end. And to that point, for them to get to the 4 or 5 or even potentially 3rd range of the rankings as a league, the defense has to be top 4, no less than 4.
I have a question for you about the Aces. Is this with the Aces this year? Last season we talked about this for the last 3 years. Basically, it's been Aces versus everybody in the league, and we've talked about the top 2 teams being cemented, and the Aces are not a part of that. And do you think there's something that the Aces can do early to cement themselves in that 3rd spot, back to like their glory, and put them back in that contending position, top 3? Do you think there's something that they can do early to fight their way into being cemented in top 3 for you?
It's a couple of things. One, naturally, Asia Wilson being Asia Wilson.
Yeah.
The reigning, well, not reigning, but one just the
probably
best player,
should have been
the best player in the league.
We'll just
the best player in the league. If she's not MVP this season, she will be 1B.
Right.
I don't think there's going to be a player that's just outright better than her.
Right.
And because of that, naturally, that puts them in a position where if she doesn't even necessarily grow per se, but just sustains at that level she was at, that's enough to put them in the top 3.
And then you got Jewel Lloyd coming in there.
Exactly.
And we have yet to see how that's going to be.
And that's the other part for me. How quickly does she get integrated into their offense?
Yeah.
Does Jackie Young's growth sustain at where it was?
Well, and
continue?
They do have so much turnover in their coaching staff. So, like, they have no continuity up there. The only person there is Becky and maybe a few other little assistants. But, like, and I don't mean to belittle anybody. That's not my intention at all. But it is a lot of turnover to face as a team,
Yep. They don't have no Kelsey Plum, and obviously with Nakase and Marsh not being there anymore, there's some newness too.
Yeah.
In addition to Jewel Lloyd coming in. So does Jewel integrate herself quickly, or is it a process? What does their defense look like? Because for all of the things that we saw, Kelsey, like, wasn't just a walking,
Right.
a revolving door defensively.
Yeah.
She was able to give them a certain type of activity that helped to bridge the gap for them. And then naturally, Chelsea Gray being healthy.
Yeah.
Chelsea Gray is healthy, then they're firmly a top 3 team.
She has been killing it.
To my point.
And unrivaled. And I low-key hate how much she's killing it because I'm like, please don't exert all your energy. We still have a whole season to play.
Should be fine.
You're right.
Should be fine.
You know, I just get stressed.
I'm not worried
I
about
just get real
Chelsea Gray
stressed.
at all.
My point guard,
right.
you know what I mean?
Should be all right.
I don't dip my toes away from that one. You know what I mean? It stresses me out.
Yeah.
I'm like, the girlies are getting old. You know what I mean?
They are low-key. But I don't think that's gonna work against her though. I think she's been rested. She's gotten healthy and
age like fine wine, just like she does.
And she's playing like this in March, in February, and January. Like there's not gonna be a drop off. So no, I'm not worried about Vegas at all. If anything, I think the us against the world mindset is gonna be even louder this season.
That's what I'm thinking is even louder because of the season that they had last year.
In addition to Jewel Lloyd coming in with her own motivation. Right. Because of her exodus from Seattle.
Yeah.
So they'll be fine. They'll be very much in everybody's way again.
Steven's looking at me like, they'll be fine and just as scary as they were last year.
Or really more so the year before that than last year.
Right, honestly.
Because the health part. So they'll be fine. And I think that's the realm of teams that the Mercury should be operating with.
Agreed.
I don't know if they get to the Liberty and Lynx realm off rip. Yet. But I think that they can get there, but it'll take time. I think they should be operating in that same space as Indiana and Vegas. If we're looking at them reaching their peak early or reaching their ceiling as early as they possibly can.
Chloe Miller, I'm glad that you were unfamiliar with her game because now you are very familiar and you know what's good because that point guard over everybody. So just go
watch the 2022 playoff highlights from her. Jesus.
No, please.
She's different.
Giving me a headache. Well, nonetheless, we've killed it today. Did we miss anything? I fear we did, but you're gonna call me out on it right now.
Let me double check. I think we hit on pretty much everything that I can remember off the top of my head. We did projections. We did the rankings. We got to everything.
Okay. Period. Well, on that note, we're gonna be back here. I think in 2 weeks. I think we're doing every other week until training camp, and then once training camp starts, we'll be back weekly. So a little bit of update for you. If you're not a PHNX diehard, you probably would have known that already had you already been a diehard, been in the Discord with us, yipping and yapping all day. You can go to there's a link in the bio. Go phnx.com and you can become a diehard today. We can get free merchandise, access to events, all this cool stuff. But also, like I said, you get just a little more inside knowledge from us and probably would have known we would have been live a little bit earlier than maybe I told you over on the Twitter account today. All that said, though, it's been real. It's been fun. It's been really fun. I didn't miss anything?
Nope, we all good.
All right, then I think we're going to sign out here. Follow us on the PHNX_Mercury on Twitter. Follow Steven at Steven PG3. Oh, I was right. And myself over at Erica Lee Day. There's some college basketball on right now. So if you're watching college basketball today, you can do that with me over on Twitter today. I'll be watching all the conference tournaments today. So tap in with me over there and we will see you guys in a couple weeks.
We all silly like the mayor.